So welcome back. We're talking to Swapnil, who will start his MBA journey at IIM Bangalore. He scored a 99.82. He had a number of calls from S P Jain. He also had a call from IIM Bangalore, missed IIM A and C. He had a call from IIM Lucknow. He had a call from IIM Kozhikode, the new IIMs, and he also had a call from IIFT. So probably, we'll try and see what was his general preparation and then look at his interview experiences. So Swapnil, if you could start with, your preparation for S P Jain, because that call, you got a profile-based call, right?
No, I got a...
You got a score-based call. Okay. So when you got the score-based call, how was your preparation for SP? What did you put in? Because they have a long form to fill in and things like that. So how did you prepare?
So when it came to form filling, it actually probes you as a person. It looks at what have you achieved. There are certain things which we as a person never tend to focus on or reflect on in our day-to-day life. So it really makes you focus on all the things that you have done. What your success stories of successes, failures, some areas where you actually guided a team, or something that you did differently. So it makes you probe as a person. How I went about doing it is, first you have to think through. There is no person who can actually make those answers for you. Because even if somebody does, when it comes to cross questioning, you might falter over there if you haven't actually done it. So you have to really probe yourself. I probed myself and then I wrote sample answers and I forwarded to you, ma'am. Ma'am did a very good job. She went through those answers, and then what happens is sometimes a simple thing is not stated very effectively by you. The effect doesn't come out. So ma'am will help you cut or probably present the thing in a far better way, which will have a great impact. So when it came to all those answers,
how many drafts did you write? I'm quite tough.
I think 7, 8.
Yeah. So that is what. So it's a long process. And when do you think students should begin, preparing for SP? So one is, how do you understand that you should apply to SP, and how should students begin their preparation for the SP form?
SP is a really great college. A lot of people who go there have work experience, so they expect a very mature kind of a batch over there. How should you go about preparing for SP is, after your CAT happens, take a break for some 1 or 2 weeks and then start reflecting on your own self. It is never the case, for example, I'll get an interview call, then I'll prepare. What has happened in a couple of my friends' cases, the interview was only 2 weeks after they got a call, in which case the things are very, very dire. So what you should do is, after spending those 1 or 2 weeks of much needed break, start reflecting on yourself as one. Try probing in as deeply as possible. It is very possible that in the first 1 week or 2 you would see not very significant contributions in your life or impact that you have made in life coming out, but the more you probe, the more you get to know. Do not leave anything as insignificant, because your learning from them might have been significant, though you do not realize it very consciously. Second thing, in the case of SP, you are also shortlisted on the basis of what your work profile has been before. So take a lot of time to understand what you have done, not only from a very nuclear perspective, but how it fits into the bigger picture. Right. See what your firm does, understand more about it, who are its competitors, what exactly is its business model, revenue model, something like that. Secondly, also try to understand about the industry and who are your competitors in that industry. For example, when it came, I come from a banking industry, and as we know, banking industry has not been performing really well in a lot of NPAs. So both in India as well as abroad as well.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time understanding my own firm, Citibank, which is huge itself, understanding a lot of businesses. I also tried understanding what its competitors were doing, both in the US as well as in India. I spent a huge amount of time in understanding the Indian banking landscape. I had absolutely no direct connect with the Indian banking landscape, but I went through the research reports. I read a lot of reports made by RBI. Secondly, there was a huge focus on the capital structure as well. So a lot of material which was not exactly needed from an interview perspective, I read it. Reason is, the more you read, the better you're able to connect stuff. You never know to what extent would the interviewer keep on probing you. Sky's the limit over here, but you don't want to come from a banking industry and they ask you what is basically your own capital, and you say, I don't know. It creates a very, very bad impression. The greater the area you cover, the better it is. Also at the same time, it's a very sweet line to balance. you have to cover a greater amount of area but with some depth as well. It cannot happen I'm just rote learning a lot of terms, and if I'm asked about a term I give out a definition but I don't know how to apply it.
Correct.
It creates a very bad impression over there.
Yeah. I've heard people who've been asked questions like, explain the balance sheet in a layman's term. So CA has been asked to do that, in one of the SP interviews. So they're just trying to see whether you really understand, you're able to communicate the ideas which were there. IIFT also expects you to fill an extensive form, many answers. Answers in the IIFT form are very different from what the answers are. So how did you prepare for that?
The good point in my case was, in case of IIFT form, the questions were a lot more relatable because a couple of questions I could directly connect it with my work
there was the global event.
Global events, and there was this question, what did you do when you had to prioritize among 10 odd things? So there was a case in my work experience where I actually had to prioritize in 10 odd things. So I could directly connect it with the work experience over there.
So that was easier, you said.
That was easier.
How was your IIFT interview, if you could share the experience?
IIFT interview was my first interview experience in this set of 2018. It was a very chilled out interview, if I would say that. What I'd heard from the previous people, what the interview panel was drilling. So I went inside and they asked me about basically what my work experience was, which I explained, and they saw that I'd done an MSc in economics. So they took it as a point to ask me more questions on. So they asked me about RBI, what is the Indian banking landscape. But the very important thing what I realize is you have to keep the answers simple. You don't have to show the interviewer that you know a lot, because in that case it creates a double-edged sword. He might get impressed and he might dig deeper, and if he decides to dig deeper and if your knowledge is superficial, the case becomes very difficult to pass through. So you have to keep your answers extremely simple. At the same time, you also have to let him know that you know what you're telling him.
How many of the questions were related to the form that you filled? How important was it in that respect?
In my case for IIFT, they hardly asked me any questions about my form.
Okay.
Even in case of S P Jain, my form and my interview were like two separate things.
Okay, so it was more related to what you have done and your work experience.
What have I done work? I think it's probably because I have a 2.5 years of work experience.
Okay, how was the CAP interview different from IIM A, B and L? Also, if you could answer that first.
So I'll answer with IIM L first, then IIM K. So basically, a very interesting question they asked me in IIM K was, they looked at me and said, you're done in your MSc Economics, now you want to do an MBA, you've also worked in a bank. Do you think your engineering has gone waste? Now what had happened was, I knew that this kind of a question would be coming, but the biggest positive in my case was there was this one concept in finance, which if people know, is something called as a duration concept, which can be explained extremely well if you know how the stresses on a beam work, which I had learned in mechanical engineering. So to the professor I told him that you can understand this duration concept by drawing actually a cantilever beam, and he seemed impressed. And that time I told him engineering did not actually go waste. It might be the case that I'm not applying the stress and strain formula in my work, but the conceptual understanding what I've gained from it is definitely helps me understand the concepts at work or in the finance industry a lot better. So that was one thing. IIM Lucknow interview was also on my work experience. There was this one point of stress in IIM Lucknow where they asked me and said, you seem to have read a lot of economics and finance. You seem to also have read Raghuram Rajan's book. What was the name of the paper Raghuram Rajan presented at Jackson Hole conference? I knew the name of the paper, but at that particular moment I was not able to recall it. But the way I turned down the question was, I told the interviewer extremely politely that, sir, I don't know the name of the paper, but I can give you the background of how that paper was presented. And I told him the entire story of what had happened. So he seemed convinced. They also asked me some really conceptual questions on finance, which I was not able to answer extremely well in terms of definition sense, but when it came to correlating it with practical examples, I was able to answer. The biggest nut was the IIM Bangalore interview. Absolutely no questions on SOP. They did not even bother looking at my SOP. And again, a cat-like situation arose. They asked me, you have an engineering and an economics degree. What would you call yourself more of? Because economics was closer to me. I said economics. And then they kept on asking me questions about my work. Now, the defining point was, IIM Bangalore asked me questions about my work in a very specific manner. They asked me what was the revenue of, say, Citibank Brazil. Help us understand Citibank's business model in terms of metrics. Now, back at Citi, I used to look after a small cluster in the Latin American region. But again, as a part of the interview preparation, I had practically memorized all the revenue, expense, profitability figures for most of the important countries where Citi works at. Even Citibank India, where I did not work directly with. So that my preparation appears very wholesome. And they kept on probing me. They probed me to that extent where I thought what I'd done at work was actually insignificant. But you're not supposed to show that. Again, I calmed myself down and said, okay, this is a stress interview. You're not supposed to show it. I brought a smile to my face. I remembered Sir had said, keep on smiling. So I brought a smile to my face, and then I kind of answered the questions the way they wanted to be. So what happens is the moment you calm yourself down, a lot of answers become a lot clearer. Which in the case of
I remember you started your preparation for all these, much before the calls came out. You already understood how much you're going to score, and then it was just to get that physical call from the colleges. Tell me how you prepared for your WAT.
So VAT, there are multiple kinds of topics in VAT. One set of topic is where it's a general knowledge topic. The more you read, the better it works. For example, again, your CAT preparation and reading helps. There are two kinds of things. For example, in my IIM Lucknow VAT, they had asked me, was demonetization a demonic move? Now you need two things to know about it. One is the content of what happened in demonetization. Some 99.7% of the currency was taken. So you need to know this concept, content one. Secondly, also need to have some finesse when you keep on writing. How do you develop that finesse? When you would have prepared a lot for your reading comprehension, you would have read some really, really rich literature sources. That helps you build that finesse. And if you want that content, you have to read a lot of newspapers. Again, those topics are not out of the blue. Those are some relevant topics that are over there. So if you keep on reading newspapers, try reading multiple newspapers, that gives you a different perspective as well. That content builds over the period of time.
You would often quote, not just in your group discussion, but also in your VAT from books.
Yeah.
And I've also shared some of your VATs on the group, so that people can understand how a good VAT is written. How were you able to quote? And it's not very easy to remember quotes.
If I read 10 books, there would be those one or two books that would be very dear to me because I understand, I kind of resonate with the concept. In that case, what you can do is, if you're very good at remembering, you can remember the quotes. Or we can maintain a book. I think Sir maintains a book where he writes those important quotes. Those important quotes are not only from a perspective of VAT, but also they'll help you write better emails, or when you're making a public speech, they'll help you in that aspect as well. So maintain a book if you're not able to remember well. You have to develop a habit of reading. So in my case, I was a lot more inclined towards non-fiction. So I used to read a lot of books on that area and then make notes or make quotes. And I had maintained a repository.
Okay. And if you came to your final, the interview which was there, after the interview, what did you feel?
IIM Bangalore interview. First thing I felt after IIM Bangalore interview, I walked up to the interview. I knew it was a very stressful interview. I immediately called my mom and I told her this was one stressful interview. Till IIM Bangalore interview happened, I thought IIM Lucknow was a stressful interview, but then Lucknow seemed a very chilled out interview after IIM Bangalore interview happened. I just asked her to pray, and then I went home. I was not able to sleep that afternoon very peacefully because all those questions came onto my mind. And what happens, ma'am, is if you keep on thinking, you always think of better answers post facto. And post facto, a lot of better answers came to my mind, but then the thing was done. But eventually, as the time passes, the impact minimizes itself.
So finally, what advice would you tell students? What advice would you give them with respect to their preparation? Maybe in terms of when they should start and how to go about it.
My piece of advice would be, do not leave this interview preparation to the end. I'll tell you why. The reason is, when you start preparing, you would see that sky is the limit. You would read one article, then you'd probably see that you also need to know these two ancillary concepts to understand this concept better. Then you go to that concept, you'll understand 3 or 4 other ancillary concepts. Start your preparation from the very beginning. Have a habit of reading newspapers. Now, a lot of cases what happens is, you're not very interested in kind of the events that happen around you. but it's very important because you're planning to do an MBA where you would be a part of corporate setup which gets affected by political, social and macroeconomic events outside. It is imperative for you to understand.
So what newspapers should they read?
My personal favorite was The Mint. I used to read Mint a lot. I liked the way, I think it was very similar to the Wall Street Journal that I used to read.
Also, there's a lot of data that only Mint offers.
Mint offers a lot of data. There is this third or fourth page where they give some data analysis. It's also good if the data analysis is something related to your sector, you make a note out of it. For example, during my interview preparation, I think the Acer report had came out. So I'd actually gone through the Acer report summary and had made a detailed note of how many people in percentage of the population in the age in the class 5 is not able to read X, Y, Z. So it's important you make a note because then you come out as a very well-read and well-analyzed candidate.
So all that preparation is fine, but then what happens is, what I've noticed is a lot of students prepare, but when it comes to reproducing it, it is difficult. How were you able to do it? So you must have written codes, but how were you able to remember, recall it at the time of the, when you were writing or at the time of the group discussion?
The thing is, whenever they give you a topic, and you have 15 minutes for WAT, just saying for that, do not jump on writing it. Just take a minute and understand how are you able to correlate that idea with the idea that you have seen before. For example, there was one book, I think Thinking Fast and Slow, which has really good idea when it comes to system 1 and system 2, how your brain works in two different ways. Now, a lot of ideas over there would be similar to this idea. For example, the financial crisis. If you look at it, what happened in financial crisis was the stock prices fell down, you can write about it. But then if you probe a bit deeper, you see that this is the cause of excessive greed or probably thinking short term over long term. And then you can relate it to one of the cases, what makes you think over short term and long term. And there will definitely be a quote or some kind of an instance which has happened in the past. So in that case, try making links in the mind. A lot of things that happen around, we see them as independent, but try doing a root cause analysis and try linking it with other things. And if you are able to memorize or visualize those links, your matter is almost 60 to 70% done.
Thank you so much, Swapnil.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's really great and all the best to you.
Thank you, ma'am. It's great.